All right, is anyone buying that the conversation that was aired live, the little pep talk that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump gave, is anyone buying that that's the entire conversation? Because I'm not. 5 days ago, round about the time that this urgent meeting was called to be held in Quantico, Virginia, Donald Trump put out a presidential memorandum. You can find it at whitehouse.gov/2025/09/countering-domestic-terrorism-organized-political-violence. I'll go ahead and read it to you. See if you can pick out the massive hypocrisy and deflection and projection of the devil's detestable character, because this is exactly what they do, but they're blaming other people and framing it as though other people are the ones who are doing this. And now they need to invoke a show of force in order to get other people to stop doing this. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, I hereby direct the following. Section 1. Domestic terrorism and organized political violence. Listen to the narrative, guys. Listen to the narrative, because this is what I told you from the very beginning. I was telling you that you were going to be identified as a cult. Now you're being identified as not only a cult, but as a domestic terrorist and an anti-Semite and a conspiracy theorist. These are all the things that you're being identified as. You remember that the word says, don't call everything conspiracy this people calls conspiracy. God is doing something. We're allowed to say it. We're allowed to say it because he's given us the God-given right to say it. I don't care if you have freedom of speech in your country. You speak it. We have an assumption of free speech in our country that is no longer. And I'm still speaking what I'm required to speak. Section 1, domestic terrorism and organized political violence. Who does this, by the way? Who does this? Israel does it. Fake Israel does it. The false prophet of the United States does it, but I'm going to be accused of this, okay? Heinous assassinations and other acts of political violence in the United States have dramatically increased in recent years. Golly, I wonder why. I wonder who's doing it. Hello? Ari Ben-Menashe, who is a former Israeli intelligence officer, has already told us that Donald Trump was... that the attempts on Donald Trump's life were enacted by Israel. We already have evidence that they've done the same thing with Charlie Kirk. We already have evidence that Charlie Kirk, of what was leading up to Charlie Kirk's death in his interactions with Benjamin Netanyahu. And you're going to tell me that everybody else, like, you need to come against this? You are it. They're the ones doing it. This is like beyond hypocrisy. This is insanity. This is like stealing someone's money and then helping them look for it. How are they going to blame other people for the things that they're doing? And then say that we need to be policed for the things that they're doing? This is insane. Heinous assassinations and other acts of political violence in the United States. Why would we have any motivation for political violence? They have every motivation for political violence, to assassinate their political opponents. We don't. What skin do I have in that game? Even in the aftermath of the horrifying assassination of Charlie Kirk, some individuals who adhered to the alleged shooter's ideology embraced and cheered this evil murder while actively encouraging more political violence. Oh gosh, it's the trans people. Are you kidding me? These genocidal, warmongering maniacs who are murderous every single day with impunity, saying things like finish them about little children that they're bombing. It's the trans people that we're afraid of. These are the people who need to be dealt with. Come on. This is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that people are this stupid that they believe this. This was preceded by the 2024 assassination of a senior healthcare executive and the 2022 assassination attempt against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Two separate assassination attempts against my own life in less than 3 months took place during the 2024 presidential election cycle. You think Donald Trump doesn't know who's trying to assassinate him? He knows. And that's why he's turned into a quiet little submissive puppet to Benjamin Netanyahu. He's no longer saying bold things like, congratulations, you've taken a lot of money from the United States. He's keeping his stupid mouth shut. He knows exactly who tried to assassinate him. Riots in Los Angeles and Portland reflect a more than 1,000% increase in attacks on U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, officers since January 21, 2025. Well, maybe that's because they're over there doing crazy stuff. There was no ICE there before doing all this crazy stuff. ICE has increased their crazy stuff by 1,000%. So, yeah, that makes sense. People are allowed to say something, or at least we have been since the Constitution was implemented, but now suddenly we're not. Riots in Los Angeles and Portland reflect a more than 1,000% increase in attacks on U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Guys, don't be stupid. When research tries to say something to you like this, you need to question, well, what else has changed? Maybe people are not happy with you, with ICE, like throwing down their 78-year-old grandfather in the middle of the street. Maybe they're not okay with them jailing people and putting them in these detention centers. And not just immigrants, but U.S. citizens who fought for our country. Something has changed. There's a reason for the 1,000% increase. And look, it's increased since January 21, 2025. Well, what changed in January 21, 2025? Trump did. Compared to the same period last year. Just yesterday, a shooting targeting an ICE facility in Dallas resulted in multiple casualties. I'm not condoning violence. That's not what I'm doing. Jesus does not call us to do that. What I am saying is these hypocrites are acting like they are creating their own problem and then acting like somebody else is the problem. They are creating their own problem in selling themselves over to Israel and then being like, assassination attempts have increased. Yeah, because of you. Because when you sell yourself to the devil expects to get something from you. And then if you think that you're free and you can just shoot your mouth off about the devil, that ain't gonna happen. He owns you now, and you have to fall in line. You don't belong to yourself. Separate anti-police and criminal justice riots have left many people dead and injured and inflicted over $2 billion in property damage nationwide. Yeah, that's also your fault. I mean, really, like, how are you going to incite violence on January 6th and then be like, violence has increased? I mean, if violence were increasing during any other administration, the former administration, which was evil too, if violence was increasing, you'd say that it was because of that president. Why is it now because of some other reason? This political violence is not a series of isolated incidents and does not emerge organically. Instead, it is a culmination of, I mean, what does that even mean? It doesn't emerge organically. Not that I think that he wrote this, because I don't think he's even capable of doing that, but what in the world does that mean? It doesn't emerge organically. Instead, it is a culmination of sophisticated, organized campaigns of targeted intimidation, radicalization, threats, and violence designed to silence opposing speech, limit political activity, change or direct policy outcomes, and prevent the functioning of a democratic society. Yeah, you should know better than anybody, because that's exactly what the image of the Antichrist, fake Israel, has done. It's not radicalization to expect everybody to worship you because you claim to be a chosen people. That's not radical. To demand that they send you arms and taxpayer money? What is radical then? To buy and blackmail our politicians and then call that a democracy? Like, what? What are we talking about? A new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminal and terroristic conspiracies. Are you listening? a new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminal and terroristic conspiracies, including the organized structures, networks, entities, organizations, funding sources. Yeah, that's the pot calling the kettle black. Come on. Funding sources? You're going to tell me you're not bot? No one's funding me. And predicate actions behind them is required. Let me read it again. A new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminal and terroristic conspiracies is required. Is required. Including the organized structures, networks, entities, organizations, funding sources, and predicate actions behind them. Is required. So, why is everyone so befuddled by why Hegseth and Trump would call this meeting? Why is everybody so confused? They put this memorandum out 5 days ago when they decided to do this urgent meeting, a week before I'm telling you that the witnesses are going to be killed and the Antichrist is going to rise to overpower and kill the witnesses. Why are you confused? You're supposed to know the word. I've been telling you for the last 3 years what's going to happen. Why are you confused? Are you dumb enough to take comfort from what was live streamed today? And be like, oh no, he just called them all to Quantico, Virginia, from all around the world just to give them a pep talk. No, something's going to go into effect. He's already told you that. It's required. A new law enforcement strategy is required. That's what he has said. And it will be enacted on anyone who does not worship the image of the Antichrist and receive the number of its name. These campaigns often begin by isolating and dehumanizing specific targets to justify murder or other violent actions against them. It's so insanity making. So insanity making. You mean by calling them a terrorist? You mean by justifying murder in the name of countering terrorism? Is that what you mean? And then saying that this is your God-given right to bear an arm to kill someone who does not believe as you believe and will not worship and bow down to the image of the Antichrist? Is that what you mean by dehumanizing people? Making them specific targets in order to justify murder or other violent actions against them? Is that what you mean? Because that's what you're doing. They do so through a variety of fora, including anonymous chat forums, in-person meetings, social media, and even educational institutions. You know, I just watched a video the other day of Benjamin Netanyahu having a conversation with a reporter who was left of those who walked out of that United Nations meeting and telling them that that Israel uses social media as a weapon to fight against those whom they perceive to be fighting against them. Simply by telling the truth, they would perceive me to be fighting against them. Why? Because I say that they're the image of the Antichrist, that they are not really Israel, that they are a group of Jews, or a group of people who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, as spoken of by Jesus to John in Revelation 2 and 3. Why? Because I called the United States the false prophet that forces people to take the mark of the beast or they won't be able to buy or sell. Does not the Seven Mountains mandate a non-biblical, unbiblical doctrine? Does that not preach that these are the variety of fora that they're using in order to spread their poison that they call Christianity, which is not Christianity? Everything that the devil does, he blames on other people. I've been hearing people say every accusation is an admission. That is the doctrine of the devil. That's what he does. That is the strategy of the devil. He accuses others of doing the very thing that he does. He accuses others of his own detestable character. And that's what these hypocrites are doing. I told you they would do it. I told you that Donald Trump would be elected. I told you that he and his cronies would be doing the very same thing. That the right made all this money. They made all this money. And I'm not saying right and left. They're both evil. Do not perceive me to be speaking politically at all. What I'm demonstrating to you is that the so-called Christian people Christian nationalists, Christian Zionists who made so much money exploiting people who are obviously unwell, who were saying, you want me to unalive myself. This is your intention in not agreeing with my crazy doctrines. They are worse because they claim to see. The so-called Christian right is worse because they claim to see. They are guilty because they claim to see. God can clean up those other people a lot faster because these devils claim to be doing it in the name of God. They do so through a variety of fora, including anonymous chat forums, in-person meetings, social media, and even educational institutions. These campaigns then escalate to organized doxing, where the private or identifying information of their targets, such as home addresses, phone numbers, or other personal information, is exposed to the public with the explicit intent of encouraging others to harass, intimidate, or violently assault them. Look in your own backyard, buddy. This is what Israel has been doing, and the Israel has been doing that to you. As in the case of several ICE agents in Los Angeles being doxed, the goal of these campaigns can be to obstruct the operation of the federal government as well as aid and abet criminal activity the federal government is lawfully pursuing. These campaigns are coordinated and perpetrated by actors who have developed a comprehensive strategy to achieve specific policy goals through radicalization and violent intimidation. Right, these aren't the things that you do. Telling your military to utilize maximum force, as though a 78-year-old man is a huge threat to you. You got to throw him down in the street like they do in Israel to their own people who refuse to serve in that demonic military. There are common recurrent motivations and indicia uniting this pattern of violent and terrorist activities under the umbrella of self-described anti-fascism. These movements portray, I'm pretty sure that is the narrative that they're using. These movements portray foundational American principles. For example, support for law enforcement and border control as fascist to justify and encourage acts of violent revolution. Now let me just pause right here, because I'm not going to disregard and not acknowledge that there are people who go out and commit acts of violence because they're idiots. They're anarchists and whatever else, and they enjoy being straight up idiots. But that is not the majority. And to claim that you're going to go after these people, and by the way, there is some evidence that they actually set them up, just like Netanyahu knew that Hamas was going to attack, but that the United States and Israel use these people who they allow to do these things, or even cause to do these things, in order to create a scenario that then justifies their violence, justifies them taking control. And that's exactly what Netanyahu has done. Why would you think that the rest of that kingdom of the Antichrist wouldn't do the same darn thing? Where do you think they might have learned that from? So there are people who go in and act violence because they have nothing better to do, and they're stupid. That's not the majority. This anti-fascist lie has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against democratic institutions, constitutional rights. Oh yeah, let's talk about constitutional rights. And fundamental American liberties. Common threads animating... By the way, that is their constitutional right. They're allowed to do it. You can jail them. Go ahead and do that. But they are allowed to speak. And speaking is not violence. Okay? Violence is an act. It's not a speech. Everybody's accountable for their stupid behavior. Speech is not violence. Common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism. Really? Common threads animating this violent conduct, anti-capitalism? And by saying anti-Americanism, then you get to define what that is. And they will. They will define what that is. And anti-Christianity. Guess what? People don't have to be Christian. They don't have to like the things that people claiming to be Christian have done. They're allowed to be anti-Christian. They're not allowed to go out and enact physical violence, but they're allowed to speak and tell the truth about what people claiming to be Christian have done. That is not violence. That is not calling people to violence. to say that the harlot Catholic Church and the prostitutes that bore out of her have a whole lot of pedophiles in there. They have a whole lot of people exploiting their members for money, for free labor, calling them their armor bearers. Me saying that to you is not me telling you, now go and act violence on these people. It's me saying it out loud. I'm allowed to say that. And let me tell you why I'm allowed to say it. I'm not allowed to say it because of the Constitution. I'm allowed to say it because God says I'm allowed to say it. And because God tells me to say it. And because God is in charge of what's going to happen to me. You're allowed to be anti-American. Even in America, you are allowed to be that. You're allowed to say that things that are going on in this country are not right. And other people are allowed to tell you, well, then leave the country. And you're allowed to tell them, no, I'll stay right here. Thank you very much. All those things are allowed. They're all allowed. But see, right now, they're trying to enact a militia that prohibits you from being able to enact your God-given rights. Because that's where your rights come from. They don't come from your country. They come from God. And so listen to the next thing that he says, because what he's going to claim is that anyone speaking these things, saying that the United States is the false prophet, saying that what's going on here is wrong, they're going to make the case that you are advocating for the overthrow of the United States government. That's bananas. Comment threads animating this violent conduct include, what does that even mean? Animating this violent conduct. Say it. Make your claim. You're trying to say that anybody who speaks in this way is responsible for the violent behavior of another person. And a couple of years ago, you would have seen right through this when the woke people, trans people, when they were saying, you're responsible because you speak the truth. You are responsible if I unalive myself. You are responsible for violent acts against us. I mean, didn't Ben Shapiro's group, weren't they saying, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I'm allowed to speak the truth. And that doesn't mean that I'm inciting violence. But now we're inciting violence. Common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. Support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, race, and gender. And by race, they mean Jews. They don't care about any other race, right? It's okay to throw down 78-year-old Mexicans in the middle of the street, but don't you dare say a darn thing about Jews, those claiming to be Jews, though they are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. I'll say that 1,000 times. Those claiming to be Jews, though they are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, not chosen. And hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. By that you mean Christians. You don't mean Muslims. No Muslims. No, they don't hold traditional views on family, religion, and morality. By that you mean they don't hold true views. They don't hold your view on family, religion, and morality. As described in the order of September 22nd, 2025, designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, the groups and entities that perpetuate this extremism have created a movement that embraces and elevates violence to achieve policy outcomes, including justifying additional assassinations. My goodness. This is just so full of hypocrisy. For example, Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin engraved the bullets used in the murder with so-called anti-fascist rhetoric. Right, he took all that time to do that. That is so stupid. I don't believe that for a second. I'll tell you what I do believe is that the microphone that was put on his shirt shot through his neck. And that the guy in the crowd who they caught on camera doing something on his shoulder, hitting a button at the very moment that went off, that those people had everything to do with the United States, Israel, and his security that came from both. I know that they killed him. I don't need any more evidence than what it tells me in the Word. That the United States and fake Israel, the image of the Antichrist, that these are the persecuting powers. I don't need any more evidence than what God has told me in His Word. If you need carnal evidence, you go have fun with that. You go listen to the lies of the CIA and the FBI. You go ahead and do that. Knock yourself out. All I need is what God has already said. The United States requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in violent political acts. Gosh, I wonder if they would consider me to be in that category. I wonder what's going to happen in a week. What I've been telling you for the last 3.5 years and had no ability to fulfill. I wonder what category I will be in. Listen to the statement again. The United States requires a national strategy. Okay, he said earlier on, a new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminal and terroristic conspiracies is required. Now he's repeating his agenda. The United States requires a national strategy. A national strategy. Do you think that you might need to call all the generals throughout the United States, throughout the nation, in order to enact a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in violent political acts? Any of you, by the way, on this channel, do any of you feel like you need to go out and commit a violent political act because of the things I've said over the last 3.5 years? Do you feel that? Because what I feel from the knowledge that God has given me is that what I need to do is lean in even deeper to what is required of me as an individual in my covenant, and I need to accept what God is fulfilling right now. And I know from the word that the people who are going to commit violent acts are those claiming to be doing a service to God. I know that the Antichrist, of which this man is a part, representing the false prophet, I know that they are the ones who are going to commit the violent acts. I know that I'm not allowed to commit violent acts. And that Jesus said to Pilate, when Pilate was asking him about his kingdom, so you're king of the Jews. Well, you've said so. Where is your kingdom? Well, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my people would fight. That's not the way we fight, is it? Paul told us what our armor is. It's spiritual armor. We don't go out there fighting. We don't go out there enacting political violence. No one on this channel has gone out and enacted political violence because of the message that I speak. That isn't the message I speak. The message I speak is for you to go and repent and examine yourself. But this is what I'll be accused of. The United States requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in violent political acts. Through this comprehensive, and by the way, by enacting violence, like that's the way that they're going to control for violence, is by enacting violence. Through this comprehensive strategy, law enforcement will disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations that promote organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights, and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society. Section 2. Investigating domestic terrorist organizations. The National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices, collectively JTTFS, shall coordinate and supervise a comprehensive national strategy to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt entities and individuals engaged in acts of political violence and intimidation designed to suppress lawful political activity or obstruct the rule of law. Well, guess what? Like, the law says that we're allowed to say whatever it is that we say. The law does not preclude me from speaking what I'm speaking. No one is compelled by me or coerced by me. Intimidation designed to suppress lawful political activity or obstruct the rule of law. What individual has the ability to even do that? But there are organizations who do it, like AIPAC. Oh, but that's not who you're talking about, right? You're talking about people who go against your agenda. Why do you think that God says in Revelation 2 and 3 that he is going to make those people who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, he's going to make them bow down at the witness's feet and acknowledge that he has loved us? Because we're being accused of all these things. We're going to be falsely represented. False witnesses are going to come and they're going to say, this is what this person is doing. And they're going to bring charges against us and we'll lose our lives for it. I've already known that. I've already known that since day one, because as is written in Revelation 12, they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. I've already known from the very beginning, God isn't stupid. He counts the costs. He makes sure that those he has chosen for a particular task are going to actually fulfill that task. God isn't stupid. This strategy shall include the investigatory and prosecutorial measures set forth in this section. B. The JTTFs shall investigate potential federal crimes relating to acts of recruiting or radicalizing persons for the purpose of, that's what I would be accused of, radicalizing you guys, political violence, terrorism, or conspiracy against rights, or the violent deprivation of any citizen's rights. The JTTFs shall also investigate institutional and individual funders and officers of employees of organizations that are responsible for, sponsor, or otherwise aid and abet the principal actors engaging in the criminal conduct described in the subsections and of this section, and non-governmental organizations and American citizens residing abroad or with close ties to foreign governments, agents, citizens, foundations, or influence networks engaged in violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or money laundering by funding, creating, or supporting entities that engage in activities that support or encourage domestic terrorism. The JTTFs shall consult and coordinate with executive departments and agencies as needed to determine whether such an agency can apply existing authorities or exercise their own authorities as appropriate to support the JTTFs investigations and relevant prosecutions of political violence. The JTTFs may, to the extent permitted by law, request operational assistance from and coordinate with law enforcement partners when investigating domestic terrorism. The National Joint Terrorism Task Force shall provide regular progress updates to the President through the Assistant to the President and Homeland Security Advisor. The Attorney General shall direct the Department of Justice to prosecute all federal crimes to the maximum extent permissible by law related to the investigations described in subsections A through C of this section. Don't be afraid of this stuff, okay? Don't be afraid of this, because no one can touch you until God allows them to. He will lead you. He will guide you. He will defend you. No one can do anything that God has not sent. And if he has sent it, he has sent it in order to purify you. You have to learn the lesson, then he will relent. The Attorney General shall issue specific guidance that ensures domestic terrorism priorities include politically motivated terrorist acts such as organized doxing campaigns, swatting, rioting, looting, trespass, assault, destruction of property, threats of violence, and civil disorder. This guidance shall also include an identification of any behaviors, fact patterns, recurrent motivations, or other indicia common to organizations and entities that coordinate these acts in order to direct efforts to identify and prevent potential violent activity. The Secretary of the Treasury, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall make available all resources to the maximum extent permitted by law to identify and disrupt financial networks that fund domestic terrorism and political violence. The Secretary, acting through the Terrorism and Financial Intelligence Office of the Department of the Treasury, shall deploy investigative tools, examine financial flows, and coordinate with partner agencies to trace illicit funding streams. The Secretary shall provide guidance for financial institutions to file suspicious activity reports and investigate indicia of illicit funding streams to ensure such activity is rooted out at the source and referred for law enforcement action as appropriate. The Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, Commissioner, shall take action to ensure that no tax-exempt entities are directly or indirectly financing political violence or domestic terrorism. In addition, where applicable, the Commissioner shall ensure that the IRS refers such organizations and the employees and officers of such organizations to the Department of Justice for investigation and possible prosecution. All federal law enforcement agencies with investigative authority shall question and interrogate within all lawful authorities individuals engaged in political violence or lawlessness regarding the entity or individual organizing such actions and any related financial sponsorship of those actions prior to adjudication or initiation of a plea agreement. Investigations should prioritize crimes such as the following: assaulting federal officers or employees or otherwise engaging in conduct prescribed by 18 U.S.C. 111. Conspiracy against rights under whatever. I'm not going to read these. Conspiracy to commit offense under blah, blah, blah. Solicitation to commit a crime of violence under, they list the statute. Money laundering, funding of terrorist acts, or otherwise facilitating terrorism under, and then they list the statutes. Arson offenses, violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, and major fraud against the United States. All federal law enforcement agencies with investigative authority shall adopt strategies similar to those used to address violent crime and organized crime to disrupt and dismantle entire networks of criminal activity. Section 3, Department of Justice designation. In the course of, and as a result of the investigations directed by Section 2 of this memorandum, the Attorney General may recommend that any group or entity whose members are engaged in activities meeting the definition of domestic terrorism merits designation as a domestic terrorist organization. Okay, so any individuals or entity, it doesn't necessarily have to be an organization like a corporation or a church or something like that. Anyone who's engaged in activities meeting the definition of domestic terrorism merits designation as a domestic terrorist organization. So he's defining it. The Attorney General shall submit a list of any such groups or entities to the President through the Assistant to the President and Homeland Security Advisor. So I'm just going to say this right now, okay? If you need to run back down Mount Gilead, you should go do that. If you're afraid of what you are called to suffer during this Antichrist reign, you're not in him. Or if you're afraid to the extent that you need to unsubscribe, you need to go away, go do that. Go ahead and do that. Because you will have made your choice. You are in association to me. I've already told you what all of this is about. And so if you haven't been discerning it, and now you need to go run and hide because you don't believe in God, you haven't discerned it, you haven't done the work that you need to do, you can go do that. I'm telling you what has happened. I don't have the ability to fulfill this. I don't have the ability to, put this agenda into this administration and then be like, see, this is lining up, directly with my death. Section 4, domestic terrorism as a national priority area. The Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall designate domestic terrorism a national priority area and develop appropriate grant programs to allocate funding for law enforcement. Okay, this is written about in Daniel, by the way. Those who agree with this Antichrist are going to be flattered. They're going to be provided money to enact the agenda of the Antichrist, written about in Daniel 11. He's going to flatter those who forsake the Holy Covenant. He's been doing it. Charlie Kirk was offered $150 million to continue doing what he was doing, being a witness to this Antichrist system. He was offered $150 million and he refused it. Good on him. I hope Charlie Kirk is able to work out his covenant in the second resurrection, because he will be given that opportunity. But he forsook his inheritance here. If he had not joined with them and fornicated with them for the amount of time that he did and perpetuated false Christianity, he would have been given the opportunity to go up in the first resurrection and inherit. But he may be given an opportunity to rise in the second resurrection, because he did give his life. He did give his life in order to refuse those things. And he was starting to come out of Babylon. But understand that those who go up in the second resurrection are only those who were here, who died prior to the fifth trumpet. Fifth trumpet is going to blow in a week. Anyone after that time will go in one of two places, either up in the first resurrection or into the lake of burning sulfur. You will not have an opportunity to rise in the second resurrection and be saved only as one escaping the flames with no inheritance. Section 5, General Provisions. Nothing in this memorandum shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof, or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget related to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. This memorandum shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. This memorandum is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. The Secretary of Homeland Security is authorized and directed to publish this memorandum in the Federal Register. Donald J. Trump. Okay, you want to know what's between the lines of that stupid show that we saw today? I knew nothing good was going to come out of it, and to be honest, I listened to very little of it because nothing good came out of it. I looked at the comments to see if anything had come out of it. Nothing had come out of it. They're not going to give up what they're doing, okay? They're not going to tell you what they're doing. It's the conversations you're not a part of in which this agenda is being enacted. But he already told you 5 days before, while they were coordinating for all of these generals to go to Quantico, Virginia, he already told you what his next agenda is. He's not that smart. He is not that smart. He plays dumb all the time about like Pete Hegseth is calling this meeting. Oh, is he? Oh, that's great. That's great that we're getting along with the generals. You're their commander-in-chief. What do you mean that's great that we're getting along with them? Like, you reporters should be happy that we're getting along. What a stupid thing to say. That we're getting along well enough for me to spend millions of taxpayer money to fly these people out and lodge them and feed them. What, for a pep talk? Give me a break. This is an unprecedented meeting and you don't know anything about it? This is just so stupid. This is what it's about. This is in the memorandum. And you guys don't seem to be alarmed. You don't seem to be concerned that in a week this is going to happen. Go discern it with God.